A damning indictment of police behaviour at the inquest into the death in custody of Sean Rigg. An unacceptable level of force was used against a schizophrenic whose life ended in a cage in the car park at Brixton police station.
It's a catalogue of errors that any ordinary human being person wouldn't commit.
Sean Rigg's brother and sister are here to discuss the dreadful failings which led to their brother's death, and the Metropolitan Police are here with their first response. There are a lot of deaths in police custody, and as far as I understand, there has never led to police officers being prosecuted. Good evening. Sean Rigg was a 40-year-old talented artist and musician, but he also suffered from schizophrenia. He died in a cage at Brixton police station in August 2008, and what happened in the last hour of his life has always been unclear. Today, an inquest jury found the police had used an unsuitable level of force against him, and the coroner said there was an absence of leadership from those who should have been looking after him. Newsnight reported on the Riggs family's campaign for justice earlier this year, but so far no police officer has been disciplined or charged in connection with the death. Peter Marshall has followed the story from the beginning.
Walking in the path of a legal perspective. I've had a belly full, so now I'm protected.
He was full of life, he was adventurous, and he was such a creative guy. He was an extraordinary person, and he had a lot to live for.
It was August 2008 when Sean, their son and brother, died. Every day since, his family have struggled amid a police and legal system seemingly stacked against them.
Sean was really trying to get on with his life, despite suffering mental illness. He wrote about his life, and he wrote it in lyrics and music, and it's very sad.
Sean Rigg died here in the cage in the backyard of Brixton police station. His treatment and neglect at the hands of the police were, in the words of today's inquest jury, more than minimally to blame. Police CCTV shows him in white trousers being led from a police van. He was dying as these CCTV pictures were taken. As he gets to the cage, a camera inside the station shows him collapsed. What happened here and the events which led Sean Rigg to be brought to the backyard of this police station to die has raised serious questions about the conduct of the police, the Independent Police Complaints Commission and the mental health services. It's taken Sean Rigg's family 4 years and today's verdict to get answers. The inquest jury was highly critical of the mental health services' inadequate care for Sean Rigg, and they were damning of the conduct and repeated failings of the police. They said the police use of unsuitable force and their absence of care contributed to Sean Rigg's death. His family agreed.
If the South London and Maudsley Trust had done their job properly and provided the care and help that Sean urgently needed, he would have been alive today. If the police had not ignored repeated 999 calls from the hostel and taken Sean to the hospital, as they should have done, he would have been alive today.
I'm just calling for those officers to be fired. They should not be able to stay in their jobs.
That's right. No, I'm innocently your Honra.
Sean Rigg would rap about the mental illness he'd generally overcome, but in 2008 he'd stopped taking his medication. Staff at the hostel where he lived wanted his mental health care team to intervene. They didn't.
The hostel were desperately trying to get Sean help because they could see that he was in deep psychosis. The mental health care team told the hostel to call the police. There seems to not be a protocol between the mental health care team and the police where this should have been, in hand.
The hostel called the police 5 times over 3 hours, only to be told the police had other priorities and they'd have to wait. This was the response to the 5th 999 call.
I do understand, Andrew.
No,
you don't. Explained to me 3 times. I've got a degree in psychology. I understand exactly what you're talking about. It will just have to wait, I'm afraid. As soon as we have a unit available,
you may have a degree in psychology.
Yes, so I understand psychosis. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I also, just out of curiosity, I am also a black belt, so I understand that. Okay?
Well, the jury were horrified. The gasps in the court. One of the jurors actually asked that particular witness if he was still in his job after that, and she appeared to be horrified when he said that he was.
The striking thing about this case is that right from the start, the jury of ordinary citizens, multiracial, 6 black and 5 white, seemed to understand the most complex and important issues. They got it, frequently exercising their right to ask questions about any apparent inconsistencies in the testimony of the police and other witnesses. Eventually, after a taxi driver called to say a man, apparently with mental health problems, stripped to the waist, was practicing karate moves, a police patrol chased Sean Rigg outside a block of flats. When the police finally caught up with Sean Rigg, they claimed in testimony it had taken only seconds to restrain him. But photographs taken by a neighbour 4 minutes apart showed that wasn't true. The jury concluded the police had spent 8 minutes unnecessarily restraining Sean Rigg with unsuitable force. He was prone throughout. Sean Rigg, handcuffed, was put on the floor in the back of the police van. With his condition following restraint deteriorating, he was taken not to hospital, but to Brixton police station. He was then left in the van for over 10 minutes.
If Sean was well, he should have stepped out the van like any other prisoner and walked straight into the custody suite. Sean couldn't do that without being aided by the police. And in fact, when he was eventually removed from the van and brought to the cage, which is just a few steps, Sean was on the floor.
At one point, they tried to stand him up, claiming in evidence he was presenting a hazard to officers who could have tripped over his body. One officer, standing over Mr. Rigg, said, "I hope he hasn't got anything. I've got his blood on me." Then added, "Oh Christ, he's faking it."
It's a catalogue of errors that any ordinary human being person wouldn't commit. Because if somebody is dying at your feet, the first thing you're going to do is stoop down. But the officers, as what came out in the evidence on the CCTV, were just standing and saying that there's nothing wrong with Sean, or that he was sleeping, or one of the officers thought that he was mute. And, you know, it was very alarming to sit and hear these things in the inquest about our brother.
Or faking it.
Yeah, they were saying that he was faking, he was pretending to be unconscious, pretending to fit, and they basically ignored a dying man.
It took 20 minutes for the station doctor to be called.
They came back on their blues and twos. Why did it take 20 minutes for them to bring the doctor when Sean was breathless? And that's actually what one of the jury's questions to the officer.
What about the IPCC?
What about the IPCC? They're completely useless.
The case has become a cause célèbre. The Rigg family say from the start they were let down by the Police Complaints Commission, who missed potentially vital evidence and waited months before interviewing officers. The campaign group Inquest say Sean Rigg's death is just one of too many.
We cannot have any more deaths like this, and yet I have seen a pattern historically of young black men with mental health problems and other people with mental health problems dying around the country in similar circumstances.
We are not going to take this anymore. It's not fair, and we want justice. Not just for Sean, but to others.
Sean Rigg, a physically fit 40-year-old, died in Brixton Police Station 4 years ago. His family say they want the Crown Prosecution Service to act.
Peter Marshall, well, Assistant Commissioner Simon Byrne of the Metropolitan Police is with us, and we'll talk to him shortly. But first, Sean Rigg's brother Wayne and sister Sam are both here. You've had a very long battle to reach even the inquest, 4 years. So what did you make of the result today?
Well, the results just told us what we already knew, but the fact that 11 ordinary men and women came to the same conclusion as us, we didn't know them. They'd looked at 6 weeks of evidence and seen police lie under oath, and looked at all the evidence and basically found that the police failed and neglected Sean.
When, Wayne?
Pretty much the same, really. For the last 4 years, this has been our life, basically, and we've become investigators ourselves. We spent many hours going through CCTV, many hours waiting for this day for the inquest to come, and we are pleased with the verdict that the jury handed down.
But what do you want to happen now?
What we'd like is file to be passed to the Crown Prosecution Service, because we believe that there's enough evidence for these officers to be prosecuted, and we think in the interests of justice and the interests of the public, this must happen.
And even disciplinaries within the Metropolitan Police?
Most definitely. It's beggars belief that some of those officers are still in their jobs.
If the file is passed to the CPS and there is no action, would you consider private prosecution?
Absolutely. We're willing to do whatever it takes to bring these officers to justice.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Sean's blood is really crying out from the ground. I don't think we can fail him anymore, and we need to stop these deaths.
And what do you feel about the actions of the Met? Do you feel let down by them? Do you think they've done as much as they could?
Absolutely not. I mean, throughout the inquest, evidence came out on how they willfully, in my opinion, neglected my brother. They knew that he was ill, knew that he was dying, in fact, and did nothing to help him.
Thank you both very much indeed. Well, Assistant Commissioner Simon Byrne is here to give the Metropolitan Police his first interview since the verdict today. Commissioner Byrne, what do you say to the Rigg family?
Well, firstly, I'm saddened, I'm troubled. This is a very serious issue for the Met, but it's the first chance I've had to sit here and unreservedly apologise for the death of Sean. I mean, clearly this has been an awful burden for the family for nearly 4 years, and there's probably little I can do to put that wrong right in the immediacy of the moment. But we are here to learn lessons and to try and reassure you and other people watching and listening, both in London and beyond. We have learnt the lessons and we now change what we do. Well,
I'll talk to you about what you're going to change, what you do, but let's just go through this piece by piece. Let's talk about the 999 calls first. 5 increasingly frantic 999 calls from the hostel, from the support hostel, over 3 hours, and the police did not respond. Is that entirely unacceptable?
It is. I mean, we hold our hands up in terms of how we managed the calls over a period of nearly 3 hours. We got that wrong, and as your reporter said, and has been repeated elsewhere, it set in train a course of events that tragically led to someone's death.
So that was the first mistake, and yet, as far as I understand it, there's been absolutely no disciplinary on the people taking those 999 calls. Surely that is unacceptable.
We have taken internal disciplinary action against one member of staff that was involved in the management of those early calls. There's then a bureaucracy around, as you're aware, serious issues like this are investigated not just for the Met but for the police nationally, and we are caught up in that bureaucracy until we get to the end of an inquest like this.
I think, yes, well, I'm sure the bureaucracy will move a lot faster perhaps now after the inquest on that issue, but let's move on to the next issue. The police claimed in testimony that they restrained Sean for a matter of seconds. The jury very calmly, very clearly looked at the evidence and said it was 8 minutes. Why did police officers lie?
Well, I'm not here to second-guess the testimony of some of my officers, and obviously...
Well, tell me how you account for the discrepancy.
Well, again, I'm not here to second-guess what they've said. Clearly, the jury, as you've said yourself, had 6 weeks to carefully consider the evidence, and they've drawn a different conclusion.
Yes, a different conclusion, but there is evidence, of course, that not only the different conclusion, it's the correct conclusion, because a neighbour took photographs which showed the restraint happened at least over 4 minutes. So the officers weren't telling the truth.
Yeah, I fully appreciate that, but if you're trying to see it from a general perspective, officers make snap decisions in circumstances like this, and I'm talking in general terms, their recollection can differ. The issue here is he was restrained, and we've learnt lessons since then about how we restrain people in those circumstances to try and prevent a repetition of this awful event.
Let's go on to the next point. The police officers involved claimed that Sean was sitting upright in the back of the van. The jury said that not only was he on the floor, he was in the footwell in a V shape. Now, you've heard from the Riggs family that he was a physically healthy young man. Within an hour of that happening, he was dead. Should he have been held in the footwell of that van, restrained with his hands behind his back?
Well, again, when you look at the detail here, I mean, if you try and imagine a situation, our officers were presented with a man that they believed and had seen being violent. They had to restrain him.
They had not. Would it be reasonable to suggest that these officers, having been told that there had been all these 999 calls, that he was making karate moves in the street, that he was bare from the chest up, that he had come from a hostel, that actually he was displaying evidence of mental illness?
Well, I think what you'll see from the sequence of events that was played out in the jury, we accept that some of the information that was conveyed to the initial officers wasn't as good as it could have been, and that led to some of the errors of their judgment.
Errors of judgment, like he's faking it?
Well, again, I can't sit here and account for individual officers because they've given their testimony on oath to an inquest, and as you've seen from today, for example, the Independent Police Complaints Commission are now reviewing what they do next.
Well,
I have to be cautious about what I say so I don't.
Well, there are some things that
you
can certainly respond to, because what the jury and the coroner found was the level of force was unsuitable, the length of restraint more than minimally contributed to Sean's death. Are you shocked?
I'm very saddened. What I can show you, for example, is if you think for that second picture where we saw Sean lying on the ground with officers near him, what we've learned since now, and we've changed, that our training tells people that when they restrain somebody like that now, we have to turn them on the side to prevent the risk of suffocation. So that we have tried to put the wrongs right. It doesn't make it any easier for two people sitting opposite me hurting, but we have tried to pick up the lessons of an event that happened 4 years ago.
Within 1 hour of Sean Rigg being picked up by the police, he was dead.
Yes.
Are the officers who were involved all still serving officers?
They are, because as I explained, there's been a lengthy process that has led to the inquest today. There'll now be decisions made by other people, which we're here to support, in terms of, well, are there any further inquiries or consequences for those officers, but we have to be bound by the judicial framework that goes with that.
You are a senior officer in the Metropolitan Police. Do you believe that there should be disciplinaries of these men at least?
Well, I think, again, I'm conscious that, you know, to the public watching this tonight, there's probably a pretty damning set of events.
But to the family, the damning set of events, without doubt, these officers failed in their duty. Would it not be reasonable to say that both the officers and the people that led them should face disciplinary proceedings? Not that something you cannot discuss because of bureaucracy following the inquest or prior to the inquest. These are sets of circumstances that prima facie they did not act properly.
Yeah, I'm going to be drawn on a snap decision a few hours after the inquest. Clearly, we're going to carefully review the findings of the inquest and what we do next, but there are other people that will take an interest in this, as you've talked in your piece, like the Independent Police Complaints Authority and the Crown Prosecution Service.
There are a lot of deaths in police custody, and as far as I understand, there has never led to police officers being prosecuted. So it seems a huge balance of probability that there are some officers who should have perhaps been prosecuted. Do you think you need to review the whole procedure around the way you treat deaths in custody?
Well, I think there's a few things just to try and put the balance right, and as I say, this doesn't bring Sean back. Firstly, we have to take every case on its merits because it's easy to generalise about a whole set of facts and figures. Secondly, the way that we actually are told to record deaths in police custody covers a whole variety of different circumstances. So if I'm giving first aid to someone that then dies, that's a death in police custody. If I'm involved in a violent event like Sean went through, that's a death in police custody. So it covers a whole panoply of different things that our officers face in day out. So figures don't tell the whole picture.
Simon Byrne, Wayne and Sam, thank you very much indeed.